What's your never again story? Story number 1. One time I went tubing down a river in my small town and it turned into a day from hell. So I lived in a town of 900 population for a number of years up in northern Minnesota. There was a river in the town that didn't seem to get much tubing action. Our family used to come up and we would go tubing down a river that was our way. This year we decided to go local, so my Phil drove us there in nothing but swimsuits. We had no phones and no shoes. He dropped us off at the bridge and drove 20 minutes away to where we would get out to wait for us. Well, we jumped in and everything was going great. The water was deep and moving slow but not bad. As we were going along, we came to a large beaver dam. We had gone too far to turn back, so we tried to crawl over it with our tubes. The other side was horrible, muddy swallow water that smelt like poop every step we took. We sank in about 2 feet of mud. Finally, the water was deeper, but the river had so many trees down on it. We had to crawl over them. By this time we were out for about an hour with no end in sight. We kept going because we had no choice. It was about 80 degrees that day and dreadfully humid. The horseflies came out and started attacking our heads. The guys got hit more than us girls, probably because of our hair. So as we float as a snail pace, the river starts getting more and more narrow. There are these bushes on either side, hanging down into the water. As we start brushing up against them, huge spiders start falling all over us. We were all screaming, trying not to touch the sides. It was horrifying. We get to an electric fence that is hovering over and across the stream at about 2 feet. We can hear it buzzing, so we knew it was on. We slid into the water and pushed our tubes under it and prayed we didn't touch it. Finally, we get through. The spider's about 2 hours in. We get to a large tree down over the river. We can't go over it because it's too big, so we all walk out about 30 feet in waist-high brush, barefoot and practically naked, to walk around this tree. As we get back to the river, we are picking ticks off us. Yes, ticks. You would think it doesn't get any worse, but it does. So finally back in the river, and by this point, we are all dying for this nightmare to be over. Also, it's getting late. It was as about 8 p.m., but in northern Minnesota summer, it's light until 10 to 11 p.m. The mosquitoes start to come out, so now we have mosquitoes, spiders, ticks, and horseflies. The river starts to become very S-like, and it's taking forever to get to wherever we were going. About 3 hours and we finally see his car. We can't get to him though, because of the curves of the river, so for 45 more minutes we can see him but keep going. We finally come wobbling out of the river, so thankful it was over. As we are getting out, we realized that we were covered in leeches. Yep, we pulled them off, and we are all bleeding from scratches and covers and bug bites. He laughed and said, "I got a bit worried there. You were gone for 3 hours. Thought you might be having too much fun." It was by far the most torturing experience of my life. Also, I was terrified that we were going to have to spend the night out there. Story number 2. Sleep with multiple co-workers, supervisors within the same job. Only 3. We all know for the most part, humans can't keep their mouths shut, so once it got out, I slept with X, Y, and Z at my job. I had throughout college. I was gossiped about so much and called the UPS behind closed doors. To make matters slightly worse, the men I slept with were all supervisors, so they thought I only did it to advance in the job. My good friend who worked with me didn't sleep with him, showed me a group chat with the guys in our work section, and showed all the hateful things said about me, and one coworker even threatened to rape me if he made a move on me, and I rejected him. I didn't quit, but after my friend showed me those messages, I stopped talking to virtually everyone at my job, except him, and I cut ties with the 3 I had relations with. I had to move my work area and everything. Let this be a lesson. Don't sleep with people at your job unless you are dating them, even if it is just a one-night thing. 2 of them were a one-time thing, but one it was a mutual friends with benefits. I am responsible for my actions, and I'm not playing the victim at all. I was mostly disappointed at my one co-workers who said he'd rape me if I reject his advances. Also, I did report him and he got fired. Story number 3. I dated the guy that lived 60 miles away from me. He hardly ever came to see me and constantly complained about the long drive. He didn't want me to visit him or pick him up from the train. He could go from hours to days without contacting me. saying he was so busy with work. He worked part-time at a pizza place, but he had me so convinced that he loved me and we were meant to be together. He had me wrapped around his finger. I'd believe any bullshit excuse he could come up with for why he couldn't come see me. This went on for 2 years. Yep, I'm that kind of stupid. Spoiler, he was seeing a girl he told me not to worry about the entire time, even living with her for most of it. They're married now. A couple months later, I started dating a guy that also lived about 60 miles away from me. Same area, around our state capital. On our first date, he drove 60 miles to pick me up. Took me 45 miles back to the capital city for an art festival. 45 miles to drive me back home. By this point, it's around midnight. He held my hand while I slept in the car on the way back. He then drove 60 miles back to his house and had to be to work at 5 in the morning. We've now been dating 2 years and have been living together for 1 year. He had 4 jobs when I met him, and he still never complained about the drive to see me. He always answered my texts and calls. There were times he'd make the drive up and we would just go straight to sleep, only for him to leave at 4 in the morning to get to work on time. We did this multiple times a week for a year before we moved in together. Story number 4. My partner and I are both young females, and we sugar baby together. We go out and meet older guys and hang out with them for money. One guy we were talking to on a sugar daddy site was very charming and respectful, sweet, etc. He seemed generous and trustworthy to us who had been doing it for a while. We met him at night at his place, 3 hours away from our home. Looking back, this was an extremely dangerous decision. We hung out and around with him that night and went home. He didn't send us an amount of money worthy for our travels and services, but we didn't learn from that lesson. After this, we continued chatting with him, and the next day, he texted us that his dick was bruised from us fooling around with him. We thought that was pretty weird, but it healed fine over the next couple days. We asked for pics and he actually sent them. Lol. Then he offered to take us on a trip, and we agreed because we don't have the money to travel ourselves. We had a time to meet him, and he told us he was going to rent a super nice hotel room to pamper us for the night. He asked us to start driving out his way without giving us the address first, which again should have told us to bail right there. But we didn't. We drive 2.5 hours, and then he texts us the address. We get there, and it's a sleazy-ass motel. We should have left then, but it was night and we were tired and still hoping to get some money from this guy. We meet him in the motel room and give him shit for it being a sleazy motel. He said it was just so he could smoke in the room. We fucked around that night still. Because this guy was so charming and stuff, we still hadn't taken ourselves out of the potential relationship. While he was fucking around with us, he suddenly had a handful of blood. We all disperse and check ourselves, but it turned out he burst a blood vessel in his penis. He luckily did not have his penis near our bodies when this happened, so no blood got on us. But it sprayed out of the tip of his dick like a hose. He was sitting on the bed, and when he stood up there was a massive puddle on the bed, in the shape of his ass. He sprayed blood all over the room while running around with his dick out, freaking the fuck out. He then had my girlfriend drive him home while I stayed and cleaned the motel room. This ended up scaring the fuck out of me because I realized he was going to have her alone at his house, but he pulled no shit and she came back. He barely left us any money for this experience. And we didn't heard from him after that. Meeting and fucking around with dudes that sketchy. Never again.